Welcome to Terabytes. Once again, a big shout out to our thumbnail editors for doing such a sterling job. But in fact, this is part 4 of episode 2 about drove roads, and this one is called The Nout Beast of Buchan, as in, fits that beast in that field. Nout. And here we can see a map of northeast of Scotland, and we can see the ancient earldoms of Buchan and Mar in the top right. They made up what we call Aberdeenshire for a long time. And below that we can see Angus and the Mearns. Now, the cattle breeders in these regions over several hundred years, they effectively took a Highland cattle and they bred another cattle without horns and also without the thick shaggy coat. The thick shaggy coat reduces the actual fat content in the beef of Highland cattle. They don't need so much fat because they've got a thick shaggy coat. So they reasoned that if they bred cattle without the thick shaggy coat, then it would increase the level of fat inside the beef, and they did. And here we have it. These are Aberdeen Anguses. And I think I can understand why they did it. If I was the farmer in charge of Tyson there in the top right hand corner, the last thing I would want him doing is suddenly growing an enormous pair of horns. But with the collapse of the cattle droving in the mid 1800s, cattle farming continued in these regions, but in the form of cattle breeders. And although there are not many cattle fairs, market fairs that still exist in Buchan, there are still auctions. And the cattle, a large percentage of the cattle that are bred in this area, they go to stud. And as breeding cows, very rarely do they go to Mrs. Tweedy's pie factory. And they're still today exported all the way across Britain and Europe. And here we can see the drove roads inside Buchan, or at least the ones that I've identified so far. And they do have a direction, in as much as that the 1 to 6 inch map that was created by the Ordnance Survey between 1840 and 1880 roughly, it actually marked on the map where all of the old market stances were. You can see all of the market grounds. You can see the one at Old Deer, Achy Braes, one at Inch, and also at Huntly as well. Bear in mind that these would still have been in use in the memories of living people at the time that this map was created. But we can actually add them onto the map here. There's 21 of them just alone inside Buchan. There does appear to be a movement from west to east towards the fairs, but there is also remnants of some older roads coming from the north coast down towards the Turriff Tryst and down to New Deer, and I suspect that there were other drove roads that came from the edges of the coastline down. Now we can zoom in on the map, and we can look that parallel to the sort of drove roads going from Rhiney, Clat, Inch, etc. there is another road, and on this road there are a number of hollow ways. You can see them right the way along here. Now, hollow ways are basically, if you take cattle down a road for 6,000 years, they will eventually start wearing the road away. And we find these hollow ways all over Europe. And here are some hollow ways. We find them right across Europe. How long they've been in use for is anybody's guess. The black and white one down in the bottom middle is Lady Carnarvon's hollow way down in Wales. But the drovers would use these hollow ways perhaps to give a modicum of shelter to the cattle, but also to corral the cattle. Why build a pen to corral the cattle when they effectively create their own? And in this place here, they then could tend to the cattle. They are, after all, heading towards market. And one of the things that they would do is they would comb the fringe of the cattle and then put a pleat into the fringe. Simply put, you can't brand Highland cattle. Their coat's far too thick. It's a pointless exercise. So by each farmer having his own particular type of braid, this was how they would identify whose cattle was who. Now, Highland cattle love getting combed, of that there's no doubt. And most distilleries in Scotland usually have a herd of Highland cows in a field next to them. Simply put, there's for most tourists coming to Scotland, there's a bit of a bucket list thing to get a photograph of a Highland cow. And in some places you can even go out and comb them. I think they call it Happy Coos Day or some such nonsense. But once they've finished and they go back to the car, the idea being is they suddenly notice that, there's a distillery there too. So I've also marked onto this map all of the sheilings. These are the little round green circles that you can see. And this is from Canmore, obviously. But the first thing to notice is just how few there actually are in Buchan. They tend to be towards the sort of west coast, near Cabrach and bordering on to Banffshire. And once again, we can see holloways here as well, these leading to and from the sheilings. Now, if we were to do radiocarbon datings on these particular holloways, I would expect to see the dates coming back round about 4000 BCE onwards, because we know that the first farmers of the Neolithic people, when they first arrived here, they practiced transhumance, and that would be as per the paradigm that we have. However, when we zoom in closer to the holloways I showed you earlier on, below Rhynie, Clat and Inch, they don't appear to be going up towards sheilings. They appear to be going towards the actual markets. So if we were to do radiocarbon dating samples from this particular route, we might actually be able to ascertain exactly just how old the market stances in Buchan are. As I suspect, I think that they are probably date from the Neolithic as well. Now, the map's becoming a little bit busy because I've switched on a lot more icons. So first of all, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I'll recap. The yellow lines are actually the major rivers. To the west we have the Devon, to the south we have the River Don. The white lines are actually streams and rivers as well, but more minor rivers and certainly not boundary rivers of Buchan. The blue lines are also smaller streams, often made by farmers. But what you can also see on this map is the lighter green balloons, and these have come from the OS map 1 to 6 inch, indicating where the stepping stones and the fords are. Now, not every drove road appears to have, when it crosses a stream, appears to have a ford or stepping stones indicated on that map, simply because in a lot of cases the streams at the point where the drove roads cross are so small you can just step over them, so there's no real point for the people who in the Ordnance Survey who created the map back in 1850 to do this. But apart from breaking up the land into much smaller pieces, roughly about 3 kilometres square, you can see the drove road going down towards Inverurie, and the direction that it takes, to a large extent, has got no choice except to follow the route of the stepping stones and the fords all the way down. One of the other things that can help to determine the exact routes of the drove roads is place names. And here's a spread of just a few of them that I've put onto the map. You can see Bowman's Hill, Bowman Stone, Bogower, Darna Bow, Lena Bow, Tilly Bow, Ligan Bow, Ochin Bow. Bow is cattle in Gaelic, or cow more specifically. The plural is ba. So if you've ever been over the NC 500, you go up over Ballachnamba, that means the pass of the cows. Bowman is a sort of Anglo-Gaelic word, basically means cowboy. And we can also see along the line of the Holloways I mentioned earlier on is Drum Gowan. Drum is a ridge and Gowan is a cattle fold. So when we come to Tipper Gowan, Tipper is the Gaelic word Tober, meaning well, and we find it in Tobermory, Tipperary, and Gowan, as I've already mentioned, is a cattle fold. So it's literally the well of the cattle fold, and once again it's right on the line of an old drove road. Once again, just to the left of Strichen, we can see Ochnari, which is the place of the shieling. Ache, place, na, of the, and Eiri, which is the genitive of Eiri, which is the shieling. If you remember over on Lewis, an Eiri was the name of the shieling over there. Well, it's the same. It's just that this one's become Ochnari or Ochneri over time. And down below we can see Ochwath, place on the main road. Ache, place. Hath is the genitive of Cath, meaning road, which is very similar to the name Achnegat or Ochnegat, which is the place of the roads. Ache, place, nan of the, and cat, genitive plural of cat, which is a road, a drove road. And two important roads cross at Achnegat. You can also see beyond them, you can see Catto Bridge and Cat Craig. The cat there doesn't refer to some sort of hunting wildcat, it literally means road. Craig is cliff in Gaelic. Now, I've removed all of the place names from this map for a reason. While making this map and actually drawing out the courses of the streams and rivers, do find some canalisation, some straightening out of the streams, but very little. You know, to a large extent, streams, they tend to follow the geography of the area and are subject to gravity. Only Muhammad can move mountains. So with regards to the streams and the rivers and the fords, this is a map of Buchan as it would have looked during the Mesolithic. And if the drove roads do date back to the Neolithic, then this is a map of Buchan as it would have looked in the Neolithic. And as such, there should be a correspondence between this map and any of the megalithic sites that we find in Buchan. Indeed, up until the 1600, when they started the first civil engineering projects, i.e. the construction of bridges and more substantial roads, then all of the archaeology in Buchan should actually marry up with this map. So what you can see here on this map is I've plotted all of the pre-Reformation churches. There are lots of churches in Buchan, and I've removed all the post-Reformation, the Congregational Wee Free, the Episcopalian, the Protestant, the Congregational Free Wees. All of the post-Reformational churches have been removed from this map. At the same time, I've removed all of the very early Christian cells, as they're called. There's not many of them in Buchan. There's a few. There's one in Kennethmont, and there's a few in the caves round about the coastline of Buchan. I've also removed all of the religious establishments, because while they would have had a chapel or a church inside the religious establishment, they're not parish churches, they're for the monks only. And I've also removed all the private chapels. Large estates and large castles would have had private chapels for the laird and his family and friends. Dunadeer's a good example, but the best example is probably down south in Edinburgh, at St Margaret's Chapel in Edinburgh Castle. Now, that's for the King and the Queen and his family and close friends when he's in residence. It's not a parish chapel, and it never was. So what you're left with is the streams have divided Buchan up into 149 areas, and what we find is that in 83% of these areas there is a parish church. There is one or two areas, especially down on the coast towards Aberdeen, where there's more than one chapel inside the area, but I think that's just due to a chronological ignorance on my part of the evolution of the churches in those areas. But once again, you can see there is a correlation between the map and the distribution of churches. Now, once again, this is the same map with Buchan divided up into 149 different regions by the white streams. And on this map this time we can see the white squares with the green circle in the middle, those are henges. The sky blue circles are stone circles, and the green sort of no entry signs, those are recumbent stone circles. I'll zoom in so you can see them just a little bit clearer. And there are none that have 3 circles of any description inside. In fact, of the 149 different areas, what we find is 72% have 1 stone circle, and 44% have 2 stone circles, which kind of bears out Mike Parker Pearson. He's the archaeologist at Stonehenge, who came up with the idea that Durrington Walls and Stonehenge should be seen as a pair within inside a sacred landscape, one being a place of the living and one being a place of the dead. And the fact that these areas that are divided up by the streams, if they are the sacred landscapes individually, then 44% of them do actually have 2 stone circles inside them. One of the things I would like you to take note is to the west, towards the River Devon, as we get up into the higher areas, and you can see they're marked more darkly on the Google Earth than the rest of Buchan, is the dearth of stone circles. So I'd like you to zoom in on this particular piece here. It's called the Tap o' the North, and as you can see, there's very few stone circles in the regions round about here. So let's have a look at this in more detail. So this is the Tap o' the North. It's what we refer to as a vitrified fort, and in the following slide, this is all of the data that was from Canmore. And we can see the Tap of the North is the green circle in the very middle. But the 2 points there, they found a glass bead and they found 2 stone axes. And up until 18 months ago, when they did the LiDAR survey, this is what they found. It is in fact the largest Pictish settlement in the whole of Scotland, with well over 500 roundhouses round about this vitrified fort. So much so that it might be difficult trying to find a stone circle in and amongst all of that. But I mention this simply because when we look at the areas of higher ground which are brown here, nowadays they're covered in peat and moss and heather. But bear in mind that in the Neolithic that may not have been the case, and that the reason there is no stone circles there today is perhaps because we've yet to find them. They could be under a metre or 2 of peat. And here's the same map again, but this time it's showing the distribution of standing stones. Now, comparing this with the distribution of stone circles, undoubtedly some of these standing stones are the remains of stone circles. And by comparing the the map of the stone circles towards this map, it may enable us to find out which ones are the remains of stone circles in the future. But I think I'll end this video here. I try to keep the videos between sort of 15 and 20 minutes long. And I think we're going to stay in Buchan for the next video. We're going to look at the various different types of roads, comparing them to the drove roads. So if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.